Welcome. My name is Grandma Storm. I write stories for young adults. Today I am reading chapters 1 through 5 in my book, The Book of Faith. The woods were tall and green, each tree a giant. The villages were scattered and few. The people were old and bent and tired. Little boys and little girls were rarely seen. It was a land in a distant place and in a different time. It was not here, but it was certainly there. Along a river in a lone cottage tucked close to a grist mill lived a little girl and an old miller. The girl's mother was buried under a grassy hill near to the cottage. The memory lingered for the little girl of the mother with the bluest of eyes. When the little girl wanted to think about her mother, she sat beside the grave to consider the time before her mother was no more. Try as she might to see her mother's face, to hear her voice, she could not. The memories were faint, faded. A bird would sing, or a breeze would toss the leaves at the top of the trees. The memory would snap shut, and she would run into the wood. The wood was her mother now. The birds were her playmates. Every tree whispered, "Take care, my darling. Stay close to me." Every bird sang, "Come away, and together we shall fly and be free." The old miller was kind but quiet. For him the grave on the hill was too fresh. The mother's voice was as an echo. Her eyes haunted his hours. He worked the mill for the few farmers needing grain to be ground to flour, tended a garden, and gazed at the river. He fed the little girl, washed her face, and combed her brown hair when he thought of it. He kept her in woolen skirts and wooden clogs, and read to her from his book in the evening by candlelight. Her eyes were blue as her mother's. The little girl had seen 6½ years pass on this green and quiet world. When the old man worked the mill, or when he wanted to be alone, he would say, "Go play in the wood, and take Sonya with you." Sonya was wise and good and a touch stubborn, but she loved her little mistress. She was black and shaggy, with a white fuzzy belly and slender bones in her 4 delicate legs. She had a switch of a tail and long, long ears. Sonya was a donkey. 2. One spring morning, a farmer named Old Scratch arrived at the mill wanting his grain ground into flour. Theophilus, for that was the miller's name, was interested in visiting with the farmer. He told Faith, for that was the little girl's name, to go to the wood with Sonya. She skipped with a smile in her hop to obey Pa, for that is what she called him. Faith went in search of the donkey and found her, dozing in the mid-morning sun. "Come, Sonya." Faith knew the request might not be enough to convince Sonya to leave her nap, and brought a little persuasion, a handful of oats from a sack in the mill. Sonya ambled over and accepted the offering. With bread and a bottle of water in Faith's pocket, they were off to their favorite tree in the wood. This tree was the matriarch of the forest. She was round and full and tall. Her roots went the deepest of all the trees. From this spot, she knew the cool rising sap of countless springs. With her thick roots, she felt the cold foundation of the earth and held the wisdom of time deep within her. Faith called it her mothering tree. Running to this grand giant, With Sonia trotting at her side, Faith rejoiced in the woodsy breath of green growth. She laughed, dancing through patches of violets. The birds added their songs, and the trees swayed, sharing in the joy of the little girl. At the wide base of the mothering tree was a hollow amongst the roots. The void was deep enough and wide enough for Faith to make a playhouse. Thick, twisted roots supplied for Faith cubbyholes and shelves for her treasures. There were clay bowls made from the mud by the river, bright feathers stuck into the earthen walls, gourds from Pa's garden, pretty pebbles, pine cones, and animal bones displayed like exhibits in a museum. Best of all, the little homemaker had a cozy bed cushioned with dry leaves and covered with old grain sacks. With a contented sigh, she fell back into the leafy bed. From where she lay, Faith observed the mid-morning sun filtered by the green shade of her mothering tree. Sonia peeked at her little charge, snuffled a snort, and shuffled off to find a snack. Faith let her mind drift to the stories from the book. Every evening, by the light of a candle, Pa read to her from the book, showing the wear of decades. The book's thick binding was embossed with silvery symbols and golden pictures. Pa told her he had two treasures in this world, the book and her. He told her the book was powerful, full of mystery and riddles that confounded even the wise. He said the book could sever as a sword or heal as a soothing balm, whichever was needed. The book could divide body and spirit. It could lay the thoughts and intents of any heart open before all. It told stories of angels and demons, giants and men, just kings and wicked queens. It told tales of gentle shepherds and plundering thieves. It told of lepers and idols, of shipwrecks and pestilence, of songs and dances. It could explain what was good for the body and what was death, even to the touch. The book exposed folly and exalted wisdom. By reading the book, a life could be changed, prepared for heaven or condemned to hell. The book revealed the beginning and the ending of all things. The book said queens possessed gold and silver, soft clothes, and dainty shoes. Faith wondered what it would be like to be a queen in a stone castle instead of a little girl in a cottage. As she daydreamed, a gray cloud drifted before the sun, separating its warmth from the little girl. She shivered and stood up, shaking off the vision of queen and castle. She rearranged her cubbyholes, fluffed her bed, smoothed the grain sacks, and stood back to admire her work. Satisfied all was tidy, Faith went to search for the bluest of blue violets. She wanted some for the table by the window in the cottage. Sonia strolled along, watching her little mistress, turning her long donkey ears this way and that, attentive to the whispers of the forest. An hour later, Faith had a fistful of violets, 3 emerald green feathers stuck in her hair, several colorful pebbles, and a bit of gray fur tucked in her pocket. The donkey nudged her mistress with her soft muzzle. Faith laughed and hugged her faithful friend. Time for lunch? Faith pulled out the bread and bottle from her pocket, tore the crust, and shared it with her pet. She was about to sit on a fallen log when she saw something that did not belong on the forest floor. An egg. Three. Faith found many eggs in her wanderings. Most were cracked or empty. This one was full and firm. She wrapped it in the fur and slipped it in her pocket to take home and show Pa. The rest of her new treasures were tucked into the roots of her mothering tree. Fresh violets in hand, Faith turned toward home. The farmer, Old Scratch, with his cart pulled by a woe-begotten mule, was leaving the mill. With a backward glance, he spied the little girl and her donkey coming out of the wood. Scratching his nose, he turned back to the lane, hit the bony mule with a prod, and went his way. Faith ran to show Pa the flowers. He nodded, cupped her face in his calloused hands, gave her a quiet smile, and turned away to close the mill for the day. Her mistress safely at home, Sonia ambled down to the river for a long drink. With a sigh of satisfaction, she trotted to her shed and her manger filled with sweet green hay. Running to the cottage, Faith went inside to find a hollow gourd. She filled it with water, arranged the flowers, and placed it on the table. She stirred the stew, which Pa had prepared in the iron pot over the fire. She went about her duties of setting out 2 bowls and 2 cups and 2 spoons. After dinner, Faith pulled the egg out of her pocket. She handed it to Pa. "What kind of bird egg is this?" "Turtle dove," he murmured as he cupped it in his hand. "Do you think it will hatch? Is it alive? I would like a pet dove." He took the egg outside, eclipsing the light of the setting sun against the thin shell. The egg held life. He could see blood and movement. "If you take care, Faith, it might hatch, but then you will have a hard task if it does. A turtle dove begins life naked, blind, and hungry. It will depend on you for everything. Do you understand?" "Yes, Pa." He went inside the cottage and rummaged in a cupboard. He handed Faith a small wooden box. "Now, make a nest with fresh green grass and place the egg in the middle." Faith dashed outside. She fashioned a grassy nest and put the egg in the box. Pa slipped it into the hollow by the hearth, where he placed bread to rise. Warmth, but not heat, is what the egg needed. While he went to tend to Sonia, Faith climbed on a stool to close and bolt the shutters. Pa came in and barred the door. He lit a candle and took the book from its place on the mantel. "Please read the story about the king," said Faith. "Read the story when he comes for his bride." 4. Arriving with the blinding blaze of the rising sun, he rose upon his snow-white steed. He came a conqueror with fire in his eyes and a bloody sword by his side. He was as a destroying angel, rooting out the dark and the dank and the evil. When he spoke, the mountains bowed down. When he commanded, the stars fell from the heavens. When he uttered the word, demons were cast into the abyss of hell. He ruled all that was created, and he ruled with an all-seeing mind. Behind him came his victorious armies. Legion upon legion marched behind the king. His banner filled the sky. His presence filled all with light. Blood was shed in battle, but not one of his was maimed or lost, because the king fought with them. He led the charge. He bloodied his sword. He defeated the enemy. With one heart, one voice, they shouted in triumph and sang to the morning sun. They commanded all creatures that had ears to hear. "Honor the king! Give praise to his name. Bow before him, all his subjects. Bend the knee, all noble hearts, looking for his kingdom. The rocks and trees of the earth found their voice and shouted, Make way, make way. He has come for his bride, make way. The stars blazed forth, overcoming the brightness of the sun, and glowed as a crown of flashing diamonds arching over the sky. The fiery host sang. It was a song of desire and fulfillment of desire. He came, the warrior king. He fought and killed and conquered to earn the fair hand of his bride. With his blood, he freed her from the prison that held her. By her own folly she had fallen. She was bound in the deepest of dungeons, held by demons that knew no pity. She fell into the blackness of despair. She was as one cursed. She was filthy, foul, and naked, tainted by madness and evil, until she whispered his name. He was waiting for her to speak. He found her and freed her. He broke the gates. He slew all that opposed him. He unlocked the prison door with the key of faith and set her on a rock. She bathed in the pure dew of heaven and breathed the free air of the earth. She was washed of the fetid stench of her folly and was clothed in the gifts of his maidens. And then she waited. He went to war to avenge himself of his enemies and of hers. One day they would be together forever. He promised. Through fire and blood and time, he would triumph. Then he would come for her. He gave his word. His word was sacred. At last, he was coming. She felt she had waited for thousands of years, but now it did not matter. It was all as a moment. She was slender and fair, filled with an inner light. When she saw him at the head of his armies, she smiled and held out her hand. Her king, her friend, her bridegroom came to take her to their marriage feast. Leaving his mount, he walked to his bride. She looked into his eyes of fire. Chaste, pure, and with the fragrance of early spring blossoms scenting her hair, she stood awaiting his command. His servants, beings of incredible power and frightening face, went before the happy pair, leading the way to the castle. The road was cobbled in gold, as clear as glass. A fair green tree marked the road and stood by a river leading to a crystal sea. Those invited were in the millions of millions. The stars had written the invitation in every night sky. A host prepared a feast of the most delicate dishes. A gossamer sheet descended from the heavens, bearing the bread of angels. Wafers, thin and light, with a subtle sweetness of nectar, were added to the feast. The goblets and platters were translucent gold, the rims encrusted with rubies and emeralds. One table was crafted to seat them all. White linen clothed the table. Rose of Sharon and lily of the valley filled silver vases at each place. The roof was the open sky, canopied by the arc of a rainbow. The feast prepared, the invited arrived. Glowing spirits of light stood behind each chair, ready to seat the guests. All time waited for this moment. A silver trumpet blew a mighty blast that echoed to the stars. A great shout rose welcoming the king and his bride to their wedding feast. He looked at her smiling face, felt the warmth of her fragile hand placed on his mighty arm, and knew all he strived for, all he fought for, all the riches he sacrificed for her were worth this one sweet moment of their shared hearts. 5. The rays of the morning sun streamed through the window. Faith stretched, reluctant to leave her bed. She wanted to drift back into the dream of the returning king and his sweet bride. Then she heard Sonia braying, "Hee-haw, hee-haw." Throwing back the quilts, she slipped on her woolen blouse and skirts over her cotton gown. She felt for her clogs with her feet and dashed for the cottage door. She made a stop at the wash house and then ran to her impatient pet. "Hee-haw, hee-haw." Faith unbolted the shed door and welcomed her long-eared friend with a scratch on the withers. Sonia replied with a sneeze and trotted down to the river for a drink. Faith cleared away soiled straw and threw down hay from the loft. She dashed back to the cottage, washed her hands and face in a bucket of water, and laid the table for breakfast. 2 cups, 2 bowls, 2 spoons. Porridge bubbled in the iron pot. Pa always started the oats before going to the mill. When he came in for breakfast, Faith chattered in her usual fashion. He usually listened, bemused, but this morning it was as if he did not even hear her at all. Faith fell silent too. After all was cleared away, Faith asked, "Pa, may I check the egg?" He nodded. She reached into the cubby and pulled out the box. He put his hand into the hollow to confirm the gentle warmth. "Turn it once a day, put it back. The creature needs to stay there a little longer." No one came to the mill that day. Sitting in the warm sunshine, they enjoyed an hour with the book. He was teaching her to read. Faith selected one of her favorite stories. It was about a shepherd. Thank you for listening. To hear more of the story, please come back soon, or you may purchase your own copy on Amazon. Just follow the link below. Until next time.